It's time for Security Now. Steve Gibson is here with some interesting topics, including why would somebody pay $500,000 for a hypervisor bug, a step-by-step discussion of how the Marriott hack happened, and a new feature in Firefox to prevent letterboxing. What? Yes, it's all coming up next on Security Now.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Security Now with Steve Gibson, episode 705, recorded Tuesday, March 12th, 2019. Spoiler. Security Now is brought to you by FreshBooks, the ridiculously easy-to-use invoicing and accounting software. If you don't believe me, try it free for 30 days at freshbooks.com/securitynow. And by Atlassian. Atlassian software powers the full spectrum of collaboration between IT teams and the rest of your organization. Visit Atlassian.com/IT to see what IT can be by giving their products a try for free. And by IT Pro TV, providing effective training with access to virtual labs and practice tests. Go to go.itpro.tv/securitynow to take advantage of their lowest prices of the season. And for an additional 30% off for the lifetime of your active subscription, use the code SN30 at checkout. It's time for Security Now, the show where we cover your security, your privacy, talk a little bit about how the internet works, how computers work with this guy right here who knows about everything, understands it all, and even is able to communicate it, a rare combination of abilities. Mr. Steve Gibson. Hello, Steve.
Actually, you know, I was seriously thinking about getting a T-shirt printed.
Yeah.
The more I learn, the less I know.
Yeah, well, that's the truth, isn't
because that really is the case. You know, the arrogance of youth who sort of think, I got this all figured out. And then when you really start digging in, you think, whoa, this is a lot bigger than I thought it was.
Well, see, that's because you're intelligent. You're not subject to the Dunning-Kruger effect.
What?
The Dunning-Kruger effect is a well-known problem, cognitive bias in psychology, in which people of low ability have mistakenly assumed that they're brilliant, they're smart.
Oh, well, yeah, and after all, really, how would you know?
Right, and it turns out the dumber you are, the smarter you think you are, and the corollary would be, the smarter you are, the more you realize, I don't know anything.
I have no clue about what's going on.
That's kind of, I think, a form of wisdom, really. As you get older, you realize, yeah, no.
Well, and I've always said that one of my favorite phrases is, I don't know. I mean,
right.
You know, when I was back, it really came to light when in the early days, I was working with an engineer who worked for me on version 3 of SpinRite. And this is the first time I sort of had an engineering group that like other people to test things and to interact with. And his name was Jim, and neat guy. He was a Gates child. So, you know, I'm sure his mother thought he was just brilliant. And
gifted and talented or something like that, education.
Yeah, Gates, exactly. And so he kept insisting when there was like something in SpinRite didn't work right, he insisted on guessing. He would just jump ahead and just guess what it was, and which is not my approach. And because I was working with him, the contrast of our approaches was very clear to me, and I said, "Well, Jim, maybe, but now we have a problem." And he said, "What?" And I said, well, you have a stake in the outcome now.
Yes.
So, you know, we all have egos. We're all human. You're going to work to prove yourself right.
That's right.
My interest is to find the problem. And I don't care. You know, I mean, I'm not leaping ahead. I don't need to guess and then plant a flag on it. I just want to go get rid of it. So, and it happened over and over and over.
Wow.
And I'm not sure I ever worked him out of that problem, but it highlighted for me as often these things often do, is, that my nature is to sort of say, okay, let's go find what's wrong. But and also I'm I would say to him, well, that might be, but it might not be. And the point being that the beginning of the search for knowledge is to say, I don't have any.
Yeah. I don't know.
And then that's where you want to start.
We should teach kids that in school, that it's okay not to know. That it's good not to know.
Yeah. Well, it's probably just genetic and hormonal, and
yeah, it probably is. As we know,
at this point,
none of this is rational, right? Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and you also sort of have to be able to afford not to know.
Yes,
and
that's a luxury
there is
too.
Exactly. So, this is episode 705 for March 12th. This is Patch Tuesday, and as always happens, I was so like every second for the last 8 hours, 4 hours this morning, 4 hours yesterday, has been in assembling this podcast for our listeners, that I ran out of time and didn't have any chance to go digging. So next week I will. In fact, there's one real question, because there's a 0 day in the 32-bit version of Windows 7, which is being exploited in the wild, or was being when it was being leveraged by another 0 day in Chrome, which Google immediately killed last week. But I'm curious to know whether Microsoft also killed it in the 32-bit version of Windows 7, and I don't know, but I'll find out. Spoiler is the title of this week's podcast, and it's supposed to be in all caps, but because it's like kind of an abbreviation, except the research paper titled Spoiler in all caps, then says colon, and then this name, sort of somewhere I read that they were so tired by the time they got through with the research, they didn't have like the oomph left to reverse engineer a name for the paper that what created Spoiler as an abbreviation. So they just said, okay, we're going to call it Spoiler, and it doesn't mean it. It doesn't stand for anything. So it doesn't stand for anything. But it is interesting. That we're going to wrap up the podcast, as we typically do, by talking about that in some depth. But we're first going to look at a 0 day exploit bidding war that is now underway. We had the NSA's released last week of Ghidra that we predicted that was at the RSA conference that the NSA formally released Ghidra, that is their interactive reverse engineering tool. So we'll talk about that. We have Firefox's addition of privacy enhancements, which were first developed for the Tor version of Firefox. This, as I was mentioning, a pair of 0 days that have been biting people in the wild, one in Win 732 and the other in combined in Google's Chrome browser. News of a worrisome breach at Citrix, and sort of their CSIO really underplayed it, I think, compared to some later news that came out. The risk of claiming to be an unhackable aftermarket car alarm. You never really want to say, we're unhackable. It's like, oh, that's just dangling the bait in front of the penetration testers. And oh boy, did we find out otherwise. We have a new and interesting Windows developers chatting with end users idea from Microsoft. A semi-solution to Windows updates crashing systems. Detailed news, finally, of the Marriott Starwood breach. A bit of miscellany from Elaine. A SpinRite question answered. And then we're going to finish with Spoiler, the latest research exploiting, get a load of this, here we are a year downstream, yet another new and different consequence of speculation on Intel machines.
Oh, no.
No. It turns out there's another thing Intel did that is to get more performance that is speculative, and it allows a dramatic leveraging of rowhammer. So it's sort of and that's part of the title of their paper that we'll be getting to. And we have, nobody knows yet, the picture of the week. We're going to hold off until after our first sponsorship promo, and then we're going to look at the picture of the week because, Leo,
yes,
it's a birthday.
I don't know, and I haven't. Well, I know whose birthday it is, so I guess I do know. I don't want to spoiler it for myself, but I haven't looked at it yet. It is a birthday, though, and I'm sure you'll have something to say about that. We talked a little bit about it on Mac Break Weekly. First, though, a word from, as you said, a little promo for our sponsor, FreshBooks. More than a sponsor from my point of view, FreshBooks really, it's a product I used for years and really saved my life back when I was a freelancer. If you're a small business person or a freelancer, you got to know about FreshBooks because FreshBooks does the stuff you don't want to do, but the stuff you have to do to make a living, to pay your taxes, keep the books, invoices. I always hated it. It was like, it's bad enough paying bills, but sending out bills, there's just something hard about doing that. And of course, if you don't send out your invoices, you don't get paid. So I was a terrible freelancer. But fortunately, I discovered FreshBooks. This is some years ago. FreshBooks makes it easy to send out really good, professional-looking invoices. Incidentally, when you start using FreshBooks, it's a web app, so there's nothing to install. You just sign up at freshbooks.com/securitynow. And when you start using it, you automatically get the ability to get paid online. So that means that those invoices you send out have a pay button right on it. It turns out, not a surprise, I guess, clients don't like paying bills any more than you like sending them. And if you make it easy for them to pay the bills, so you don't have to get the checkbook out or whatever, they just press the pay button. They pay on average twice as fast. So it's easier to make the invoices. You get paid twice as fast. And then something magic happens because in the process of making invoices, and I also used the FreshBooks app, took pictures of receipts because I had to bill them for air tickets and other expensive meals, hotel, stuff like that. So I just take pictures of the receipt, put those in the invoice too. FreshBooks automatically incorporates them. It turns out in the process of, well, the invoices are accounts receivable. When you get paid, that's accounts receivable. That's accounts paid, right? That's income. The expenses, those are all in there. FreshBooks will even go out and log into your bank account. You can set this up and get the expenses there. It puts that all together, and boom, your books are done. It's doing your books. You can get accounting reports for tax time, the kinds of reports your accountant wants. You get, it's all kind of magically happens. And you know something that you don't normally know as a freelancer. You know at any given moment how much you're making, whether you're making a profit or not. That's kind of important. Spend less time on accounting, more time doing the work you love with FreshBooks. It is the ideal self-employed accounting software. And a lot of convenience features, automated recurring invoices, for instance, automatic dunning notices when somebody doesn't pay you on time. You can log hours, the time tracking in the app or on the website. The reports are easy to understand. It can capture expenses, categorize them automatically. It's just easy to use. It's kind of gets the pain out of there. It integrates with everything you're using like Expensify and Stripe and Bench and Funbox and G Suite and Gusto. They're always adding new features. Because it's a web app, you always get those new features right away in the dashboard. Add taxes to expenses in bulk, select multiple invoice statuses and reports, keep track of item sales reports, things like that, on and on. Every time you log in, you say, oh, look, they did that. Oh, that's nice. You can try it free for 30 days. Will you do that? You'd be doing me a favor, and you'd be doing yourself a favor. Freshbooks.com/securitynow. And in the how did you hear about us form field, just put security now in there if you would, so Steve gets credit. FreshBooks, it's awesome. Freshbooks.com/securitynow. Use Security Now in the How Did You Hear About Us section, and you'll get 30 days free. That's more than enough time to know whether it's right for you. FreshBooks, and I'm sure it is. It was for me. Freshbooks.com/securitynow. What are you laughing at?
Now I'm wishing that I had titled this podcast Vague but Exciting.
Okay.
Because that was the comment that Tim Berners-Lee's boss wrote at the top of his document, which proposed the creation of something which grew into 30 years ago.
Oh, that's hysterical.
The World Wide Web.
Oh, my God. Vague, but exciting.
Vague, but exciting. So our picture of the week is a picture of the document.
Wow.
And you can see in the upper right-hand corner, it says March 1989. So that was 30 years ago. And what is not clear, and I'm not sure how much time Tim's boss spent staring at this diagram, but this is a self-referential diagram that is a diagram about this document. Because you can see where in the lower right it says CERN, DD Division, OC Group, RA Section, Tim Berners-Lee. So there's a hierarchy, wrote, and there's an arrow, wrote this document, which then describes, it's pointing to hypertext, which includes hypermedia pointing down and includes linked information, for example. And anyway, so
HyperCard's actually in this document, which is cool.
Yeah. And in fact, there was some commentary that suggested that HyperCard, had it been network aware, which it wasn't, could have swayed things in a very different direction. Because HyperCard might have had a very different future had it been network aware. So anyway, this thing is under the heading Information Management, a proposal. The abstract, and again, I don't disagree with the boss who said vague. The abstract says this proposal concerns the management of general information about accelerators. Now we're talking about linear or circular. We're atomic accelerators. I can't think of the right word.
Particle accelerators.
Particle accelerators and experiments at CERN. It discusses the problems of loss of information about complex evolving systems and derives a solution based on a distributed hypertext system. That's all that means. So there's the abstract. And so you can imagine the boss saying, huh? That's kind of vague, but I'm excited. Anyway, so the point is that it was 30 years ago that Tim wrote this letter or produced this proposal, which foretold and actually, from that, over the course of sort of some evolution. I have a link to it below the picture if anyone is interested. Anyway, I just wanted to commemorate this
it's a big
30
deal.
years ago history, and so begat what we now know as the World Wide Web. And I'm thankful. It's interesting. He talks about the loss of information, and we do have, although there is some link fade where you go after something that where the domain got lost and something that we were hoping to find is gone. Although we do have the web archive, and I found myself several times actually in the past week using the web archive to find some information which it had grabbed following links and archiving when of domains that had since been disappeared. So it is nice to have that, but it is also is the case that we just anything you want to know. I just make so much use of the internet for expanding my knowledge. Okay, so last week's topic, as we know, was careers in bug hunting. While we were delivering that podcast last Tuesday, and although we were primarily talking about HackerOne, I mentioned Zerodium as an admitted alternative cache-out source if someone found a particularly tasty and important zero-day flaw. Important meaning, in something that where it really matters, and like in a named mainstream product that would allow somebody exploiting the flaw, we won't characterize them, to gain some information that they're trying to get. As it happens, while we were delivering that podcast, Zerodium was upping the ante. They tweeted, quote, "We're paying up to $500,000 for zero-day exploits targeting VMware, ESXi," and they said parens vSphere, or Microsoft Hyper-V, and allowing guest to host escapes. In other words, VM escapes, to get to the underlying OS. They said the exploits must work with default configs, be reliable, and lead to full access to the host. Contact us. And then there was a link in the tweet. And then they signed off Zerodium at Zerodium, March 5th, 2019. $500,000 for something that someone discovers in Hyper-V or in VMware. So it turns out Zerodium does, and has in the past done, what they call acquisition raids, offering limited time increased incentives for classes of flaws they have a particular interest in obtaining, either, I presume, to balance out their exploit portfolio. And of course, as we know, these flaws are being found and patched on an ongoing basis. So there is some churn in their portfolio. And I would love to be on the inside of the contract that they have with the purchaser of one of these, to get a sense just for what it looks like. Like, clearly they're paying a lot for it, and they're not wanting it to be disclosed. It is in the interest of the purchaser of the flaw who wants to exploit it not to disclose it, so that they can use it against, presumably, in targeted attacks. This is nothing you're going to spray all over the internet, because it'll be found immediately by all of the different security services that are looking for anything like this. So, and presumably the purchaser, if Zerodium is paying $500,000, we don't know how large the other side market is, how many people are purchasing these, but they're going to be paying a pretty penny. We do know that it's typically governments and intelligence services of governments that are paying.
So that's how this economically works with both Zerodium and Hacker Lab, is that they're a marketplace. They're reselling it on to somebody else.
No, HackerOne is not a reseller.
Zerodium is. Oh.
Yes. HackerOne, for example, would be contracted by GE.
I get it.
To be like the middleman to handle all the mechanics and payment and terms and conditions. So the idea would be is GE, being a responsible provider of software, recognizes that the best way to get their bugs found is to offer a bounty. So there, HackerOne is a contracted middleman but Zerodium is very different. Zerodium is, they're selling them to the dark side, arguably. Got it. Anyway, so they do these periodic, what they call acquisition raids, to increase the incentive, either to balance out their portfolio. Maybe, as I said, some of the things in their portfolio are killed because they're patched, or perhaps they have a customer who is making a particular request. And so again, they're standing between the security side, us, the public, and the backside, and we don't know who is, like what the terms and conditions or what anything about the interaction on the other side of this. So maybe they have a customer who says, okay, we really have a need for a Hyper-V 0-day. So, we're willing to give you a $250,000 if you can get one to us. And so Zerodium turns around and says, well, we can resell that several times over. So let's bump the bounty for this to $500,000, knowing that, $500,000, that would be some significant incentive. It's not like, oh yeah, we'll pay you $10,000 if you stumble over a browser escape or something. It's like, okay. So you can imagine that's going to have an effect. In this acquisition raid, they bumped the payout for a high quality, solid and stable hypervisor exploit from what it had been $200,000 to $500,000. ZDNet, in their coverage, asked Zerodium's CEO what the deal was. He replied by email saying, our new payout for hypervisors will last for a couple of months, and then we'll decide if we reduce it or keep it high, depending on the number of acquisitions we make. And that kind of gave me a chill. It's like, whoa, the number of acquisitions, suggesting, not one, but, oh, look, we got 5 new 0 days. Anyway, Zerodium has previously held such acquisition raids for 0 days in iOS, in instant messaging apps, in the Tor browser, aka in the Firefox version of the Tor browser, in Linux, in Adobe Flash Player, in routers and USB thumb drives. And okay, so the fact that they've done it for the Tor browser, that sort of gives you a clue about who's on the other side buying them, because they're not going to be bumping the bounty unless there's some reason to believe that they've got a buyer or buyers of these specific things. So what's really going on here, believe it or not, is it's becoming a bidding war, and Zerodium was being outbid. Last summer, we talked about this at the time, Microsoft made the decision, and I salute them for this, to buy up its own flaws when they upped the ante for Hyper-V bugs to $250,000. So Microsoft has been and is officially on the record saying, we will purchase a bug in Hyper-V for $250,000. Well, if that's the case, first of all, that outbids Zerodium and other exploit buyers who are only offering only $200,000. And, whereas selling a powerful 0 day to Zerodium would leave me feeling a bit compromised, I would feel 100% great selling Microsoft one of their own bugs. That would be wonderful for $250,000. Right?
Well, yeah, it's a win-win. Everybody wins, including Microsoft Windows users.
Yes. So, and you're just selling Microsoft their own bug. Here you go. I'll be happy to take $250,000 for telling you about a problem I found in your stuff.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's 100% cool. But Zerodium's CEO told ZDNet, quote, Microsoft's bounty for Hyper-V exploits is very attractive for researchers. However, he said VMware is not paying anything to 0 day hunters. We have decided to fill this gap, as he put it.
Oh, and they're such nice guys.
Yeah, isn't that nice? We're going to fill that gap because nobody's paying anything for those problems in VMware. He says, and we've been paying $200,000 for such exploits. And he says, we've acquired many of them so far. He said, however, we've recently observed an increase in demand from customers, and we have decided to increase the bounty to $500,000 to outbid vendors and all existing buyers.
Wow.
So, specifically saying to outbid Microsoft, to double what Microsoft has been offering, Microsoft being an existing buyer of problems in their own product. So Zerodium claims that the company's hungry customers are government and law enforcement agencies, and these do seem like government-level purchase prices. So again, we don't know how big the market is on the dark side, but there obviously is one if they're willing to pay $500,000 for a Hyper-V or VMware ESXi escape to the host. And, the idea that we'll see how many we get, then we'll decide if we want to, keep them coming at $500,000 each, or drop it back down to be, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, if they were offering it for $250,000 and Microsoft was offering it for $250,000, I'm selling it to Microsoft because, selling it to Zerodium gives me a creepy feeling. I mean, Zerodium gives me a creepy feeling. But again, I mentioned them last week because if we had somebody who decided to make a career out of finding problems, and they did find a problem that was significant, I couldn't fault a bug hunter for selling it to the highest bidder. That's not fair, really. But if it's your bread and butter, I mean, if it's not something you just stumble upon, and again, $500,000 is $500,000. So, wow. Anyway, we're now having a bidding war, is the bottom line, between companies. At least in the case of Microsoft, who is saying, yeah, we'd rather buy them ourselves than. I mean, look, from Microsoft's standpoint, look at it. Zerodium was offering $200,000 until now. Microsoft said, okay, we'll see you and up you $50,000. So Microsoft was at $250,000, being willing to outbid Zerodium for flaws in their own software, feeling that that's better than allowing Zerodium to purchase them for $200,000 and resell them who knows how many times to who knows who, because there's no reason to believe that these things aren't going offshore. So Microsoft, I think, did the right thing. Is Microsoft going to outbid Zerodium? I don't know. Anyway, interesting to see what a weird market has developed around flaws. And boy, there's money in them there flaws. Last week, as predicted and planned, and as we talked about several months ago, the NSA did release Ghidra version 9. That was last Wednesday during the RSA conference. This is, I'll remind our listeners, their free, powerful, and mature interactive multi-platform reverse engineering tool. The official site, you should bring this up on the screen, Leo. It's neat. Is that second link there? Ghidra -SRE.org. And actually, I'm
the NSA at RSA and actually met one of the developers of Ghidra. They were all excited about Ghidra.
Yeah,
at the RSA.
After our mention of it a couple months ago, I received all sorts of terrific feedback about Ghidra's backstory and proper pronunciation, because I was clueless. I think I was saying Ghidra or something. Anyway, several people said, Steve, it's Ghidra. Anyway, there's sort of an IDA, if you stretch, in the middle, and that's for interactive disassembler. So that's where this word came. Yeah,
but it's also Godzilla's, buddy.
Yes, exactly. Anyway, Ghidra has been used internally at the NSA and other similarly closely aligned government agencies like the CIA we talked about a couple months ago for more than 10 years, during which time it's been evolving and developing continuously. It will doubtless prove to be extremely useful for anyone researching the operation and security of closed source software, and of course, including for reverse engineering malware. The NSA explained that their general plan was to release Ghidra to enable security researchers to get up to speed and get used to working with it, get this, before applying for positions at the NSA.
It's a recruitment tool.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Or other, isn't that interesting? Or other government intelligence agencies with which the NSA has previously shared Ghidra privately. So as we explained when we first noted this coming release, Ghidra is a free alternative to IDA Pro, IDA, Interactive Disassembler, which is a similar reverse engineering tool that's only available under a very expensive multi-$1,000, like several $1,000s priced license. So by being offered for free and soon to be open source, they're still in the process of getting it ready for open source release. There is a link. You can find a Ghidra at GitHub, but it points you over to this the site that you went to and brought up on the screen. So by being offered for free, of course, most experts expect Ghidra to snap up a big portion of the reverse engineering tools market share immediately, especially since the reviews have been almost entirely positive. On GitHub, the NSA has this to say. They wrote, Ghidra Software Reverse Engineering Framework. And that's what the SRE is, Software Reverse Engineering. They said Ghidra is a software reverse engineering framework created and maintained by the National Security Agency Research Directorate. This framework includes a suite of fully featured high-end software analysis tools that enable users to analyze compiled code on a variety of platforms, including Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. Capabilities include disassembly, reassembly, decompilation, graphing, and scripting, along with hundreds of other features. Ghidra supports a wide variety of process instructions, they actually meant processor. They wrote processor instruction sets. And by God, I saw the 6502 is there. So if you've got an Apple II or a Commodore 64,
I can disassemble Chopper Command.
Exactly, or Dig Dug or Gold
Super Breakout,
Load Runner.
Load Runner.
Yes.
Ooh, I would like to disassemble that. Yeah.
Anyway, and executable formats, and be run in both user interactive and automated modes. So literally, it will emulate the processor, and you can run the code in Ghidra. Users may also develop their own Ghidra plugin components and or scripts using Java or Python. They wrote, in support of NSA's cybersecurity mission, Ghidra was built to solve scaling and teaming problems on complex SRE, again, software reverse engineering efforts, and to provide a customizable and extensible SRE research platform. NSA has applied Ghidra SRE capabilities to a variety of problems. Oh, don't you know it? That involve analyzing malicious code, and generating deep insights for SRE analysts who seek to who seek a better understanding of potential vulnerabilities in networks and systems. This repository, meaning at GitHub, is a placeholder for the full open source release. Be assured, efforts are underway to make the software available here. In the meantime, enjoy using Ghidra on your SRE efforts. God, I'm so tempted to play, but I can't. Developing your own scripts and plugins.
Steve, spin right 6, Steve.
I know. And perusing the over 1 million lines of Java and Slay code released within the initial public release. The release can be downloaded from our project homepage. Please consider taking a look at our contributor guide to see how you can participate in this open source project when it becomes available. If you are interested in projects like, here it is, if you are interested in projects like this and would like to develop this and other cybersecurity tools, the NSA, for NSA to help protect our nation and its allies, consider applying for a career with us. So anyway, Leo, this is going to be big. I'm sure that IDA Pro has been cracked, and you can get like cracks for keys and so forth, on the net. There's just no way that a tool for that, with that kind of profile, that is being sold for that kind of money, hasn't been cracked by the crackers and available. But having an arguably superior tool, as I said a couple months ago, this announcement was not good news for the folks at Hexrays that have been arguably extorting the market because they had a captive market for years. That's over. Installing Ghidra is as simple as unpacking a zip archive. The only requirement is a version of the JDK, the Java Development Kit 11 or later, which is needed to run the app's GUI. The tool's official docs had the following to say about installation. Well, or quasi-installation. They said, Ghidra does not use a traditional installer. Instead, the Ghidra distribution file is simply extracted in place to the file system. This approach has advantages and disadvantages. On the upside, administrative privilege is not required to install Ghidra for personal use. Also, because installing Ghidra does not update any OS configurations, such as the registry on Windows, removing Ghidra is as simple as deleting the Ghidra installation directory. So you just dump the files out of the zip and you're ready to go. They said, besides an installation guide, Ghidra's docs also come with classes and exercises for beginners, intermediates, and advanced levels that will help. I mean, the NSA is really going for this. Although this was probably all developed for partners like, other people at the CIA and other law enforcement, where they wanted to do reverse engineering, but they were like, huh? Now we unpacked it. Now what do we do? So the point is, there's a lot of support here to help people get it going. And they said this will help users get used to the tool's GUI, which is very different from any similar tools, i.e., IDA Pro. So this is not good news for the Hexrays folks, but it was inevitable. And boy, I mean, this is a strong offering. And Leo, I think this is going to be significant. The idea where you have a tool like this. I mean, I really think this is enabling of, for example, this is the perfect follow-on to last week's subject of, a career as a bug hunter. You cannot bug hunt unless you have a way of looking at code. And here it is, free for the download, a potent world-class tool for allowing someone to start looking into code and developing an understanding of what it's doing and how it works. I just think this is very cool.
Now they just have to release a fuzzing tool, and we'll have the complete set.
Exactly.
We can do all the hacking, all the reverse engineering.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interestingly, Firefox is adding something to their mainstream browser, which the Tor version of Firefox has added a while ago. It's an anti-fingerprinting technique called letterboxing. And as I was reading about this, I was thinking, really? So I suppose that I underestimate how determined online advertisers and profilers are to track us. And I guess I'm not that worried. But I certainly get it that knowing all the places that a user goes can reveal a great deal of information about them. So I suppose I'm glad that my browsing habits are likely to put anyone tracking me to sleep, because, I'm not very interesting from a where do I go with my browser standpoint. But I also do get it that the idea of unseen tracking and profiling can deeply offend the sensibilities of many users. They are, after all, not being asked and not being remunerated in any fashion for providing the indirectly providing the history of their use of the internet to unknown and unseen third parties who are apparently making money from that, the collection of the data to whatever degree that can be determined, who they are and where they go and what they do. So my underestimation of the determination of the trackers is revealed by the fact that Firefox thinks this is necessary. Okay, so the Tor project uses a version of Firefox, as I mentioned. The Tor folks have gone to, and there I can understand it, the extreme lengths to protect the privacy which their users very clearly want. We know that JavaScript running on a web page, and specifically in advertisements where JavaScript runs, is able to query for the size of the browser's display window. This is super useful for making responsive websites, which dynamically alter their appearance to deliver a good experience regardless of viewport size. This is the way state-of-the-art sites are able to reconfigure themselves. The script that loads the page, or that loads on the page, immediately looks to see, where am I? Am I on a desktop? Am I on a mobile platform? What's the shape of the window? How big am I? And then builds a web page essentially on the fly in order to suit the environment that it's in. So that's script that needs to know about its viewport. So definitely important. But the instantaneous size of the browser's window, not surprisingly, can also be a signal that leaks identifying and de-anonymizing information to web page scripts. And of course, this is especially true when a user has their browser's window at some intermediate height. I actually sometimes do. If I've got a sufficiently large screen, I'm not running edge to edge or top to bottom. It may be sort of floating a little bit, which means that that means that JavaScript running on any frame for any reason on any tab of that browser will see a much more unique and arbitrary height and width. And in fact, I think the script can also get the coordinate of the upper left corner, which would give it additional information. Anyway, the point is that could provide substantial disambiguating information to anyone who was tracking with serious intent. as we've discussed in the past from time to time, the mainstream Firefox browser has been backporting various enhancements for privacy, which were initially developed over on the Tor side, back into the mainstream Firefox. And this will happen again in 2 months, in May, with the release of number 67 of Firefox. It will inherit this so-called letterboxing. Letterboxing deliberately masks the browser window's true dimensions by rounding the window width and height down to even multiples of 200 pixels in width and 100 pixels in height, respectively, during window resizing, which generates a much less unique window dimension for its users. And of course, to do this, they're having to jump through some hoops. So during dragging, gray space will be added at the top, bottom, left, or right of the current page as needed to fill in the gaps. And if that sounds like something you don't want, and I'm certainly not as concerned as perhaps I should be, I don't really want this. The good news is that this new behavior will be a capability only and will be disabled by default. Once we get to release 67 in 2 months, you'll have to set privacy.resist fingerprinting to true in Firefox's about:config page in order to enable this letterboxing, which gives tracking scripts one less exact measure to track. I want to just share what Mozilla wrote on their Bugzilla page about this. They said, window dimensions are a big source of fingerprintable entropy on the web. And I don't doubt that a bit. Maximized windows reveal available screen width and height, excluding toolbars, and full screen windows reveal screen width and height. Non-maximized windows can allow a strong correlation between two tabs. That's something that had not occurred to me before, but that's also true in the same window. Then they said, while bug 1330882 takes care of new window creation, it would be ideal to protect windows continuously, even if users resize or maximize their window or enter full screen. They wrote, for Tor browser, we experimented with an approach to dynamically round the viewport, that is the content rectangle, dimensions to multiples of 200 by 100. In our prototype, when a user drags the corner of a window, the viewport snaps to the largest contained multiple of 200 by 100, leaving a temporary margin of empty gray space in the window Chrome. Then, when the user stops resizing, the margin of the window shrinks to nothing so that the outer Chrome tightly encloses the viewport again. So, what you would see would be you'd be smoothly dragging the lower right corner of the window, or I guess any corner of the window, and the contents would be sort of holding back as you say that you were increasing the size. The contents would be holding back until it had the ability to grow by a multiple of 200 in width or 100 in height, and then it would snap to that next size. And in the interim, it would be the margin would get filled with gray. So again, this is where I'm kind of thinking, whoa, really? Are you guys that worried about this? Apparently. Then when you let go, it will the outer Chrome would snap back to tightly enclose the inner viewport. So this gray, you wouldn't be left with this gray outstanding. So anyway, that's what they're planning to do, and it'll be available to anyone who is serious about wanting to reduce the amount of fingerprinting available to anyone who is like watching them very closely in Firefox. As I said, I'm not that concerned about it myself, but I wanted to bring it up, and I'm sure I'll mention it briefly in 2 months when 67 lands.
You saw the thing Mozilla also did. They're really cranking it out. The new Firefox Send.
No.
Oh yeah, this is a cool feature. Private encrypted file sharing through. Actually, you don't even have to use Firefox. You go to send.firefox.com. If you're just somebody off the street, you can send up to 1 gigabyte. If you sign in to your Firefox account, 2.5 gigabytes. It gives you an anonymous URL, which you can click, HTTPS, downloads. It's a pretty nice feature for people who need to send files. Now, I know you had a system that sent much larger files.
File mail that I had discovered.
But this is right in the browser.
2.5 gigs
ain't
is
bad.
Great.
And I think most people who use Firefox have an account.
And I have a Firefox. I mean, I am a Firefox user, and I do have an account because I use it to synchronize my tabs between locations.
Right.
That's interesting. So I upload a file to them. They give me a link, which I then send to somebody else.
That's right.
And do you know how long the file stays available?
It's temporary. Let me see if it says. They do say it's temporary, with a link that automatically expires. Let me upload something and see how long it's drag and drop to upload. Oh, you can expire it after 1 download to 100 downloads, or 1 day to 7 days.
Nice. So
and you
file
can
mail
password
is
protect
7
it
days.
as well. Yeah.
And you have to pay file mail in order to add password protection.
No, that's all for free.
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad our listeners all heard you.
It's a great I think a very useful service. And 2.5 gigs is a lot. Especially since you could break it up. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And speaking of breaking it up.
Yes. Should we break this show up into little tiny pieces? Well, I'll tell you what. I'll do an ad. You go have a cup of coffee, and we'll continue in a minute. But first, a word from Atlassian, the folks that keep us on track, and many of you on track. I know developers know Atlassian because of Jira. It's kind of the tool for agile development, but it's also for IT teams. Let's not undersell that. That is a fantastic tool, and that's what our IT team uses to keep track of projects they're working on. You know who's responsible, what stage it's in, and there's nothing more satisfying than sliding that task over into the completed column. That is a good feeling on Atlassian's Jira. And the nice thing about Jira is it integrates with many other Atlassian tools like Confluence, which we use to document our workflow, our changes. It's really important when you have an IT team that everything that happens is kind of documented in a way that you can go back and refer to it. And, of course, we have a fairly complex workflow and lots of complex software, and I'm sure we're just a fraction of the amount maybe your team has. Confluence is a huge help to us. IT really is the center of the universe these days, right? And if you are, a company that has an IT team, you've got to know about Atlassian, the collaboration software that empowers IT teams all over the world. It's really important that you stay competitive in this cloud-based world. Your IT team has to plan and execute both faster and better than ever before. That's normally hard to get both, but you can do both if you've got Atlassian. Today's applications are more complex than ever. Incidents often require open, agile, and smart coordination between ops and software development teams. The expectations are high, the stakes are high, and it's IT that's smack dab at the center. You can be proud of the fact that you're playing such an important role, but you can also maybe get a little anxious because falling short inside of business-critical workflows, well, that could have dire consequences, not just for your company, but for you. Enter Atlassian, the company behind Jira, whose software tools are designed to manage this kind of complex collaboration and make it possible. This really was the key, as a developer, the key to Agile and to Jira was taking an impossibly complex problem and breaking it down in a way that, you could attack it and really fix it. And if you've ever been through that process, it's amazing. But it's not just for developers. Atlassian offers an affordable, reliable suite of tools for teams of all kinds, all sizes, from DevOps to Agile to IT apps to Ops to ITSM and whatever's next for your team. Atlassian provides the technology backbone to help modern IT organizations plan, service, and support the kind of change that propels business. With Jira Software, Confluence, and Bitbucket, that's their source database, their source management tool, Atlassian forms the backbone of effective cross-team project planning, organization, and communication. But there's more. There's OpsGenie, there's Status Page. Both help teams detect incidents better, coordinate response efforts, resolve issues faster, keep customers or stakeholders up to date. All of that's important, and you got to do it all. You can't let anything slip. Look, choose the tool that's right for your current framework, and trust that as you grow, Atlassian grows with you. And it all integrates seamlessly with Jira and Confluence, so you don't have to bounce around from platform to platform. Everything you need is right there. Like all of Atlassian's products, the tools for your IT team are easy and free to try. Just go to Atlassian.com/IT and find out which Atlassian offering is right for your team. Try Atlassian today to see what IT can be. That's Atlassian.com/IT. Steve?
So, send.firefox.com is just it's not a button in the browser. It's a site.
I would guess a service from Mozilla.
Yeah, exactly. And so for example, well, for me, Bing, it's 2.5 gig. That's plenty, and I like the fact that I can encrypt with a password. They say simple private file sharing. Firefox Send lets you share files with end-to-end encryption and a link that automatically expires. Now, wait, end-to-end encryption. So that
they
would
can't
suggest,
see it, right?
Right, but I'm thinking that means the recipient has to be able to decrypt. So the link
that's interesting.
the link you get must be to send.firefox.com. So that you that means you send someone that link, they click the link, it brings them to send.firefox.com, which then allows them to that allows your browser to decrypt the blob that comes down. Anyway, they say encryption and a link that automatically expires, so you can keep what you share private and make sure your stuff doesn't stay online forever.
Which is, of course, what you want.
Yeah, and so they're sort of selling the idea of expiration, which actually is a practical matter for them. They don't want to have all these 2 gig blobs sitting around and stuck forever. Which is it made sense for file mail too. But I do like the idea that you can password protect something that is sensitive and that it's encrypting it in your browser and then decrypting it in the recipient's browser. So I'm sure there's some browser side JavaScript that is doing probably in WebAssembly that's doing encryption on the fly. That's just really cool.
Yeah, they're really this is part of their manifesto. This is what they what they're doing. And I guess this has been around as a test, but they're making it official. Even say they'll have an Android app. So
week. You give it a password. That would mean that you'd have to send the recipient the link and the password, which then they put into their browser in order to perform the decryption.
Symmetric encryption. Yeah.
Yep.
So
nice.
Yeah, pretty cool. And that's a nice service. I these guys. This is really I don't know if it's a non-profit. They make a lot of money in that Google search bar there. But they really are certainly altruistic in their efforts. I think it's really good.
Very pleased with what they're doing. Yeah. It's still my browser of choice. I like because it's got integrated tabs, and Google just seems to refuse to do side tabs for some unknown reason. So
you're a tab guy.
Oh my goodness, I couldn't survive without them. So, and by the way, in case anyone's listening. Free, what's it called? I should have prepared. The tab tool that I uses CSS to customize the tabs. And as a consequence of a recent evolution of the Firefox browser, it's tree style tabs. And I saw somebody somewhere said that they weren't happy with it because their tabs were too large. And like me, I want itty bitty skinny tabs so that I can stack a whole bunch of them. And it turns out it is CSS style sheet customizable with lots of sample CSS styles already pre-canned. So you can do all kinds of things. So for what it's worth, it's I really like that freestyle or tree style tab. Okay, so Chrome and Windows 7.32 were suffering an in the wild 0 day. Week before last, on Wednesday, February 27th, and coming to light a week later, so last Wednesday, security researcher Clement Lesigny, who is with Google's threat analysis group, discovered and reported a high-severity vulnerability in Chrome that could allow remote attackers to execute arbitrary code and take control of the computers that their end users were using. And Google has warned that this 0 day remote code execution vulnerability is being actively exploited in the wild to attack Chrome users. The vulnerability was assigned a CVE of 2019-5786 and affects the web browsing software for all major operating systems, although, that is to say that the Chrome vulnerability is present in all major operating systems, Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. And until a majority of Chrome's users have been auto-updated, the Chrome security team is deliberately keeping all technical details to themselves. They've only stated that the trouble is a use after free vulnerability in the file reader component of the Chrome browser, which leads to remote code execution attacks. And we've talked about this kind of vulnerability before. A use after free refers to memory that was temporarily, often briefly allocated by the operating system when the browser had something it needed to do. And you can imagine that file reader would be that kind of thing. After that memory is no longer needed, it is released. It's freed. That is the use after free. So it's freed back to the operating system. But due to a coding error in Chrome, essentially an accessible pointer to that memory persisted, and it could be used by a sufficiently clever attacker to execute code on of the attacker's choosing on the user's PC. So Google Security said access to bug details and links may be kept restricted until a majority of users are updated with a fix. And as we know, that won't take long because Chrome is constantly updating itself. I always have, since I do run Chrome, it's got stuff running on my machine 24/7, essentially checking to see if there's anything new and updating itself autonomously. So I'm sure this wouldn't take long. And this is, again, an example of sad as it is, the fact that one way or another, today's software really that has an attack surface, and as we know, nothing has a larger attack surface than a web browser. Today's software that has an attack surface has to be able to update itself within short notice. Anyway, they said we will also retain restrictions if the bug exists in a third-party library that other projects similarly depend upon but haven't yet fixed. So they're going to, look to see how pervasive this is and make sure that it's not. If it's not just constrained within their browser, they may not tell us for a while, despite the fact that Chrome has long since eradicated the problem. Anyway, so this file reader API is a standard JavaScript API that's been designed to allow web applications to read the contents of files or raw data buffers stored on a user's computer using either file or blob, as they're called, objects to specify the file or data to read. Then, that was Wednesday of last week. The next day, on Thursday, we further learned that the active in the wild attack was actually leveraging a pair of 0 days, the one in Chrome being the first, and a previously unknown 0-day existing, as far as we know, only in Windows 7 32, but not affecting Windows 10. And notice that it was observed on the 32-bit versions of Windows 7. We don't know for sure that it doesn't affect other versions. And this is what I was saying. I also don't know, because Microsoft has known of it for 2 weeks. Well, that's not a long time in Microsoft's world to prepare a patch, depending upon what it is, for a patch Tuesday that was today. So they only had apparently 2 weeks notice, because that's all Google research was able to give them. So, but it was actively exploited in the wild, so it would have had priority with them. It's a local privilege escalation in the Windows Win32k.sys kernel driver that can be used as a security sandbox escape. So, of course, that's why it's of use if you have a browser vulnerability. You may still, despite the fact that you've got a vulnerability, you may be constrained by the browser's own sandbox that prevents you from doing anything. So you also need a sandbox escape, thus the second vulnerability in 32-bit versions of Windows 7. The vulnerability is known as a null pointer dereference. In Win32k, there's a function mn get pointer to item from index under certain special circumstances that the bad guys were able to leverage in order to pull off an exploit. So Google said, we strongly believe this vulnerability may only be exploitable on Windows 7 due to recent exploit mitigations added in newer versions of Windows. And they said, to date, we've only observed active exploitation against Windows 7 32-bit systems. So then they finally said, pursuant to Google's vulnerability disclosure policy, when we discovered the vulnerability, we reported it to Microsoft. Today, in compliance with our policy, we are publicly disclosing its existence because it is a serious vulnerability in Windows that we know was being actively exploited in targeted attacks. So targeted attacks, not spray, or not widespread. And they said the unpatched Windows vulnerability can still be used to elevate privileges or combined with another browser vulnerability, that is a theoretical browser vulnerability, to evade security sandboxes. Microsoft have told us they are working on a fix. So we don't know. Again, if we made it into this patch Tuesday, I should know next week. And hopefully, Microsoft tends to be better, well, like way better than Apple, for example, in telling us what things they have fixed after they have been. So we may be able to know one way or the other. I mentioned at the top of the show that Citrix was not having a good year. Last Wednesday, Citrix learned, and this is a little obscure because they actually apparently learned earlier than this, but I'll explain. The news coverage said that Citrix learned from the FBI that their own corporate Citrix network had been infiltrated. When I read the blog posting by Stan Black, who's their chief security and information officer, now known as a CSIO, it didn't seem like that much of a deal. So, and again, I can understand him wanting to sort of downplay this. His posting said, on March 6th, 2019, the FBI contacted Citrix to advise they had reason to believe that international cyber criminals gained access to the internal Citrix network. Citrix, he writes, has taken action to contain this incident. We commenced a forensic investigation, engaged a leading cybersecurity firm to assist, took actions to secure our internal network, and continued to cooperate with the FBI. Citrix is moving as quickly as possible with the understanding that these investigations are complex, dynamic, and require time to conduct properly. In investigations of cyber incidents, the details matter, and we are committed to communicating appropriately when we have what we believe is credible and actionable information. While our investigation is ongoing, based on what we know to date, it appears that the hackers may have accessed and downloaded business documents. Okay, now that was the line that caught me up short when I've learned what actually apparently happened. It appears that the hackers may have accessed and downloaded business documents. Okay. The specific documents that may have been accessed, however, are currently unknown. Okay. At this time, there is no indication that the security of any Citrix product or service was compromised. Okay. While not confirming, he says, the FBI has advised that the hackers likely used a tactic known as password spraying, a technique that exploits weak passwords. And of course, we've been talking about this recently, credential stuffing is actually what it's called. Once they gained a foothold with limited access, they worked to circumvent additional layers of security. Right. Citrix deeply regrets the impact this incident may have on affected customers. And then I thought, what? Wait.
But it didn't affect Citrix's products or services.
That's right. Citrix is committed to updating customers with more information as the investigation proceeds and to continuing to work with the relevant law enforcement authorities. So I was a bit curious about that second to last sentence. Citrix deeply regrets the impact this incident may have on affected customers. Okay. Because, of course, as I said, it appears that the hackers may have accessed and downloaded business documents. Anyway, I assumed that meant Citrix business documents, right? So that was Wednesday. 2 days later, last Friday, NBC News posted the story with a somewhat different take than Citrix's own CSIO. NBC's headline and lead-in read, Iranian-backed hackers stole data from major U.S. government contractor. The hackers are believed to have penetrated the software giant Citrix years ago.
Oh, boy.
And have remained inside the company's computer network ever since. Ooh, ouch.
Boy.
NBC said Iranian-backed hackers have stolen vast tracts of land. No, vast amounts of data from a major software company that handles sensitive computer projects for the White House Communications Agency, the U.S. military, the FBI, and many American corporations, a cybersecurity firm told NBC News. Citrix Systems, Inc. came under attack twice, once in December and again Monday, according to ReSecurity, which notified the firm and law enforcement authorities. Employing brute force attacks that guess passwords, the assault was carried out by the Iranian-linked hacking group known as Iridium, which was also behind recent cyber attacks against numerous government agencies, oil and gas companies, and other targets, Charles Yu, ReSecurity's president, said. And here it comes. The hackers extracted, are you sitting down, Leo? At least 6 terabytes of data and possibly up to 10 terabytes. That's a
big document.
That's
what?
10 trillion, 10 trillion terabytes in the assault on Citrix, you said. That's YOO. The attackers gained access to Citrix through several compromised employee accounts, he said. So, quoting him, so it's a pretty deep intrusion with multiple employee compromises and remote access to internal resources. So between 6 to 10 terabytes of something was exfiltrated from Citrix. This sort of sounds as though it might be their customers' business documents. And yeah, Citrix would likely regret the impact that this incident would have on their customers. The security company, of course, in question was ReSecurity. And in their own reporting of this, I've got a link to their blog posting in the show notes. They indicated that Citrix, and this is what's a little troubling, was first notified of the presence of an Iridium APT, an advanced persistent threat, last December. ReSecurity wrote, quote, Friday, December 28th, 2018 at 10:25 a.m., ReSecurity has reached out to Citrix and shared early warning notification about targeted attack and data breach. Based on the timing and further dynamics, the attack was planned and organized specifically during Christmas period. So what's odd is that Citrix's CSIO, who presumably would have been the recipient of ReSecurity's note back on December 28th, stated in his blog that on March 26th, 2019, the FBI contacted Citrix to advise they had reason to believe that international cyber criminals gained access to the internal Citrix network. Yet ReSecurity makes it very clear that they notified Citrix of this 3 months earlier. So one wonders whether Citrix just ignored the first report. But in any event, a multi-year targeted 6 to 10 terabyte data exfiltration makes this a major breach of a major cybersecurity services company. Yikes. Okay. And why you never want to loudly proclaim that our security cannot be hacked. Pen Test Partners blog posting is titled Gone in 6 Seconds? Exploiting Car Alarms. The two most popular aftermarket car alarm systems in the world open their owners to hacking. Who would have guessed? Pen Test Partners blog begins, key relay attacks against keyless entry vehicles are well known. And of course, you and I, Leo, have covered key relay attacks extensively in previous years on this podcast. Their blog says many third-party car alarm vendors market themselves as solutions to this. In other words, key relay attacks are bad. You need to install this alarm system to be secure. We, they write, have shown that fitting these alarms can make your vehicle even less secure. It's no surprise. These alarms can expose you to hijack, maybe allow your engine to be stopped while driving. And it may even be possible to steal vehicles as a result. Okay, so the car alarm systems are those by Pandora and Viper. And Viper is known as Clifford in the UK. And I bought the shortly after getting the very first version of SpinRite up and going, I bought a Jeep Cherokee and I equipped it with a Clifford alarm system. That was at the time, the alarm that you wanted, digital encoded and all that. So I had a Clifford alarm.
Notice you don't hear car alarms go off much anymore.
No,
used to hear them all the time. Remember?
Oh, they were so annoying, especially those ones that went through like 25 different.
So annoying.
I know, awful. Anyway, they have been found to be vulnerable. Not surprised. That is, these car alarm systems by Pandora and Viper have been found to be vulnerable to remote exploitation. enabling attackers to hijack the vehicles they're installed on and spy on their owners. The exploitable software flaws are found in the smartphone apps used to control, because of course we're going to give you an app for that, to control the alarm systems developed by Pandora and Viper. So get a load of this. The smartphone app has been downloaded more than 3 million times. Pen test partners who poked at the smartphone app said that the vulnerabilities are relatively straightforward, insecure direct object references in the API. They said that simply by tampering with parameters, one can update the email address registered to the account without authentication, send a password reset to the now modified attacker's email address, and take over the account. So, in other words, it's apparently trivial to change the email address, then ask for a password reset, which then goes to the changed email address, which then allows you to take the account away from its owner, and then you have access. Having access, playing with these parameters, you are now able to locate the car in real time, disable its alarm, unlock it, enable or disable the vehicle immobilizer. In some cases, you're able to kill the engine while driving. One of the 2 alarm brands allows drivers to be snooped on through a microphone in the car. And depending upon the alarm, it may be possible to steal the vehicles outright. And the flaws they observed in the car alarm APIs exposed huge amounts of personally identifiable information. They also noted that it's not necessary even to purchase an alarm. That is, you don't have to own an alarm system. You're able to create a trial, test, and demo account online and then take over. From that demo account, it's possible to access any genuine account. It just sounds like it's horrible. Like one of those put the email address as a parameter in the URL kind of things. I mean, just unconscionable security, and retrieve the user's details. So in their blog, I'm going to quote some things because it's amazing. They said, under killing car engines to order, they wrote, this part is crazy. We discovered we could kill the engine on the Viper-equipped car, that's the Clifford, known as Clifford in the UK, whilst it was in motion. Promotional videos from Pandora indicate this is possible too, though this doesn't appear to be working on our car. So they had a Pandora alarm-equipped car. The intention is to halt a stolen vehicle, except using the account takeover vulnerability in the mobile app, one could kill the engine of any car fitted with these alarms. Audio snooping on drivers. They said, yes, really. The Pandora alarm has the ability to make SOS calls. A microphone is fitted in order to enable this. The microphone can be accessed and enabled remotely, allowing the authorization flaw in the API, or owing to the authorization flaw in the API. Therefore, all cars and drivers with the alarm fitted can be silently listened to. Millions of drivers snooped on. And then they said, CAN control. And of course, that caught my attention because, of course, we know that the CAN bus we've talked about extensively on the podcast. They said CAN control, period, OMG, exclamation point. Both the Viper and Pandora have the ability to send custom CAN messages. They said, this is where things get a bit scary. In recent years, car alarms have the ability to interface directly with the CAN. This is necessary given the level of complexity, they write, of modern vehicles. This also helps to reduce alarm wiring and installation time. Yeah, just plug it into the bus. Higher-end alarms can automatically detect the vehicle type they are being fitted to and customize their command set to the CAN messaging being used. This speeds up installation significantly. How convenient. However, they write, when the alarm doesn't recognize the vehicle or it isn't automatically supported, the installer will need to program the alarm manually. As far as we can determine, they write, alarm programming has to be done locally using a laptop app or, more interestingly, a mobile phone using Bluetooth. While there appears to be methods to program over the air from the API, they aren't documented fully, and we haven't been able to fully reverse engineer them yet. We are still working on this area, but each requires a different vehicle with an alarm fitted to prove it. But, they write, start-stop functionality is already enabled. After analyzing the firmware, manuals, and related change logs, we found some scary functionality. It is vehicle-specific, so we've been unable to test it all. If you own one of these vehicles with the relevant Pandora alarm, we would love to know if it works. Obviously, take great care and don't advertise doing this. Oh, and we don't advise doing this, no, on public roads. Mazda 6, Range Rover Sport, Kia Quaris, Toyota Fortuner, I guess they meant Fortuner, Mitsubishi Pajero, Toyota Prius 50, and the RAV4. These all appear to have undocumented functionality present in the Alarm API to remotely adjust cruise control speed. Some workarounds for start-stop functionality also require a false brake pedal message to be sent, simulating the driver pressing the pedal and starting the vehicle. So anyway, we covered the CAN bus and the power that it has in detail. As we know, and we talked about at the time, there's an explicit and deliberate firewall which separates the infotainment side. There's essentially multiple CAN buses now with a careful firewall that allows controlled bridging of the two buses. So that separates the infotainment side from the critical vehicle operations side. It's clear that these extremely insecure alarm systems are being attached to the critical vehicle operations side, meaning on the dangerous side of the firewall, in order to give them the control they require. So essentially, anyone adding this aftermarket alarm system is bypassing the CAN bus firewall and attaching a highly insecure and obviously very poorly designed system to the inner guts of their car. Fearing that the bad guys might already know of these vulnerabilities and be exploiting them in the wild, these pen test partners outfit gave both companies a very short 7 days to fix this most obvious security problem. Both Pandora and Viper, to their credit, responded and patched them immediately. Pen test partners wrote, Pandora's UK representative responded in about 48 hours and had their Moscow-based headquarters take action quickly. The insecure direct object references were fixed overnight, and we confirmed that the following morning. Viper responded even faster, but took a little longer to fix the vulnerability. That one is also confirmed fixed. They also wrote, it's important to note that we did not carry out a full test of the APIs. Doing that would have required further authorization, which we don't have. We have no idea if there are other vulnerabilities in the API. In other words, they found the big horrific flaw in the alarm systems and notified the vendors. What they did not do was perform a full in-depth security audit. And boy, that really is wanting. That should be done. It's scary to imagine that. I mean, if this first obvious problem was found so easily, and these alarms are being directly plugged in over on the engine side of the CAN bus, and can generate custom CAN messages, this is a really ripe for exploit. And I saw the numbers, and I didn't put it in the show notes. Tens of millions of these alarm systems exist and have been installed. So a big target of opportunity. Okay, so everybody who's listening to the podcast, I want you to raise your hand if you use the Alt-Tab Windows key combination.
I use it on Windows, Mac, and Linux.
Yay, you're a power user, Leo.
What?
Well, definitely some of us use it, but I'm sure it's a minority of Windows users. I use it often to quickly ping pong typically between a pair of apps. Sometimes I'll use it to find an app that's deeper down in the MRU, the most recently used stack. But I mostly use it to toggle between a pair which I'm interacting with. It's sort of so Alt Tab is my go to, or my go back to the previous app jump. And so, for example, when I'm working on this week's podcast, I use an outliner called Thought Manager Desktop, which is no longer on the market.
That's a vintage program.
Yes. It was on the Palm Pilot. It was an outliner for the Palm Pilot, and it had a Windows add-on component, which was the desktop version, and you could export the things you did on the Palm Pilot to the outliner. But believe it or not, of all the outliners available for Windows, it is the simplest and cleanest, and it's where I do all of my brainstorming and project organization is in Thought Manager Desktop. And so anyway, so I'll have it, and then I'll have Firefox, and as I'm pulling notes together and grabbing URLs and text from various web sources, I'm copying, and then Alt Tab bounces me to Thought Manager, then Control V pastes it, and then Alt Tab brings me back to the browser, and so I'm bouncing back and forth all the time. Anyway, my point here is that Bleeping Computer had an intriguing piece about a new practice that Microsoft is exploring. Believe it or not, they're having and inviting 5 to 10 minute conversations by appointment with Windows 10 users about their usage of specific Windows features. Lawrence Abrams, who covered this, wrote, Microsoft has started to display notifications in the Windows 10 Action Center asking users to have a phone call with Microsoft developers and provide direct feedback about, in this instance, there was a different one in February, he says, but in this instance, about the Alt-Tab feature in Windows. While using a Windows 10 Insider build today, I was shown a Feedback Hub notification stating that, quote, Microsoft wants to hear your opinions. To set up a phone call with Windows engineers, go to, and then there's a link. Microsoft apparently has a domain, www.aka.ms, which I thought was kind of cute, also known as .ms, and then /alt-tab. He says this link then redirects to a web page at ux.microsoft.com /alt-tab. He says it's not known if this is only being shown to Windows Insider's users at this time. When users visit this link, they'll be shown a Microsoft user research page stating that a Windows 10 product team is looking to, quote, understand our customer needs, unquote, and would like to have an anonymous 5 to 10 minute phone call with the user. In this particular case, the phone call will be with Microsoft engineers to discuss how users use the Alt-Tab feature to switch between apps. Microsoft states they're performing these calls in order to get a better understanding of how a feature is being used while they're in development. And so they said, quote, your feedback is important to us. As we develop new software and services, it's critical that we get feedback from customers who use our products. Hearing from you early in the development cycle helps us make changes to our products and test them before release. Early customer interactions ensure we hit the mark with features. The time you spend with us today can improve our products for users around the world. So, according to the website, Lawrence says, Windows engineers will be available on yesterday, 3/11/2019, between 11:15 a.m. and 1 p.m. Pacific time, and today, 3/12/2019, between 9:30 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. Pacific time to schedule a call. The page goes on to say that users can expect a 5 to 10 minute call, but it could last longer if there is more to discuss. They also state that the calls will not be recorded, are anonymous, and the content of the call will not be stored. And then Lawrence wrote, well, when researching this notification, I ran into a Reddit thread where a user received a similar notification over the weekend. Jen Gentleman, a community manager and software engineer at Microsoft, stated that these notifications are a new program being piloted that gives engineers the ability to talk to users in real time about features they're working on. So he says this is not the first time that Microsoft has asked Windows 10 users to call engineers. In February, Microsoft also asked users to contact them regarding the Windows Update feature. So anyway, I just thought that was fascinating that, like, okay, we're going to expose our cloistered and closeted Windows 10 engineers to actual end users. And I don't know if you get this notice if you don't use Alt-Tab. I mean, or
what about Alt F4? I think you should definitely talk to those people.
Oh, the close button.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the most obscure shortcut that people would use all the time if they only knew it.
Yep.
Wow.
Bang. Yeah.
Jeez.
Isn't that interesting? It's like, okay. Now, of course, I would say just leave it alone.
Stop messing with it. Yeah.
Stop messing with it. But no. Yeah.
Wow.
And Leo, time for our last break, and then we will we'll finish the podcast.
Can it be that time has come? Our show today brought to you by, as always, those good folks at IT Pro TV. I want to give them a nice big fat plug. They were at the RSA conference last week, and it was really fun to see them. Tim and Don and the gang have created something that I think is a national treasure, to be honest. A place you can go to get IT skills to get into the business. And what a great business it is. I think there are a lot of people who see the writing on the wall, who realize, I don't know if you're a truck driver or you're selling furniture, or the job market is changing dramatically, and are thinking, we talk a lot about retraining. How can I get some skills that are going to make me valuable in the market? Well, if you're geeky enough to be listening to this show, you're crazy if you're not in IT, because your skills are not only in hot demand, the salaries are high. There are, at the last time I checked, 1 million openings for security, computer security professionals in the United States. That's the kind of thing you can learn at IT Pro TV. And I'm not telling you go to some tens of thousands of dollars technical school to learn this. That's, by the way, if you've ever priced out a technical school, it's ridiculous. It's like going to college. I guess it is in a way, except IT Pro TV is so much more affordable. Now, there is a catch. You have to be the kind of person who can sit and watch stuff like this. I think you are, if you're still listening 2 hours in, that is engaged enough to teach yourself by watching and listening to really good tech professionals who know their business, engaging with the chat room, because they have a chat room like we do during the live broadcasts, taking the tests, the practice tests, and doing the workshops and all of that stuff. If you're that kind of person, a self-starter, this is easily the most affordable, best way to get the skills you need to get the best job you ever had, a job in IT. Experienced IT professionals also use IT Pro TV to stay up to date, because if you're in IT, you know that that's one of the reasons it's a great job, because it's changing all the time. It's never boring, and the more you learn, the better your salary. There's no better time, by the way, to take advantage of IT Pro TV than right now, because they've lowered the prices dramatically. A standard membership is $28.50 a month. $28.50 a month. Premium membership, which includes all the videos, but also labs, so you can, even if you don't have a Windows machine, you can use an HTML5 browser, configure Windows servers, set up Windows machines, and practice tests, so you can take the test before you take the test. That's, even with all that, still only $42 a month. But because IT Pro TV loves Security Now listeners, some of their best students, I think the majority of students are Security Now listeners, so they really want you to join, because they know you're going to be an asset to the community. It's not going to run much longer, because this is a ridiculous thing, but we're going to take 30% off of those prices forever, as long as you stay active. That means the standard membership is less than $20 a month, less than $200 a year. That's a no-brainer. One IT training book and practice test is more than that. And the premium goes down to $29.50 a month or $295 a year. So basically, if you buy the year, you get paid for 10 months. That's $295 for a year of brilliant IT training you're going to love. You can watch it. They do what we do. They do video. You can watch on a big screen TV, because they've got Roku, they've got Apple TV, they've got Fire TV. You can watch on your PC on the website. They have iOS and Android apps. You can Chromecast it from there. It's really easy to watch. Listen in your car on the way in. Watch at work. New content is added almost every day. They're always in the studios, and they have 5 studios. So they're recording a lot. Your training always is, the latest certificates, the latest exams, because they're producing, then going from studio to the website, the on-demand site, within a day. So it's very up to date. They are officially CompTIA's official video training partner. So if you're going for any of the CompTIA certs, like A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, this is the place to go. They've got 12 CompTIA on-demand courses. Now, a course is not just one video, by the way. It's a bunch of them. So here's what you do. I want you to go right now. Just, they have a free trial. You can see what it's like. Honestly, I think you'd be nuts not to sign up for this. If you're not in a job that's fulfilling you, if you're not in a well-paid job, if you're not, doing what you really love, visit the site. go.itpro.tv/securitynow. go.itpro.tv/securitynow. The offer code to get that 30% off is SN30. SN30. I don't know how to nudge you. If you get your girlfriend to do it, or your boyfriend, or your husband, or your wife, just say, "Hey, I heard about it." They'll come on, you got to do this. Go.itpro.tv/securitynow. But don't forget to use the code SN30, because you're going to get 30% off, not just for the first month or year, but for the lifetime of your active subscription. At those prices, there's no better way. There's no more engaging way to learn the skills you need to get the job you've always wanted. IT Pro TV, flexible training, binge-worthy content, life-changing results. It is awesome. Steve's the only person I know who doesn't need IT Pro TV. He could teach it, but you're teaching us right here.
That's my job.
That's your job.
In other Win 10 news, aside from Alt-Tab and who uses it, Self-uninstalling updates is
Lord.
a new. I know.
You shouldn't really need that, but okay.
I know. If when you can't get it right, you can at least determine that the Windows didn't start up and then back it out. Windows 10 will soon acquire the ability to autonomously uninstall updates that cause problems for it. Can you say we're losing control of the boat? According to a support document published yesterday, Windows 10 will begin automatically uninstalling automatically installed Windows updates that cause startup failures due to some incompatibility with something. It's because it's just becoming too fragmented, and they're constantly changing it. Updates will be automatically removed when Windows detects that it has recovered from a startup failure after all the other automatic recovery attempts have been unsuccessful, unquote, whatever that means. So, and furthermore, to prevent an immediate repeat, because of course Windows will go, oh, I have an update missing. Windows will blacklist those from installing for the following 30 days. So Microsoft wrote, to ensure that your device can start up, which is handy,
Yeah, we would want it to start up. Yeah.
To ensure that your device can start up.
Yeah.
And continue running. Oh, yes, after starting up, you would like it to continue running as expected.
Indeed.
Windows, this is a new benefit, Leo, of Windows. It will continue running. Windows will also prevent problematic updates, those pesky problematic updates, which we've had so much of lately, from installing automatically for the next 30 days. This will give Microsoft and our partners the opportunity to investigate the failure and fix the issues. After 30 days, Windows will try again to install the updates. Wow.
This is actually really good because this does happen.
Yes. I know it does happen, and it is good, but it's sad that it's necessary.
It's weird.
Which is what both you and I understand. Users who still want to install them, and who would that be? Because they believe the removed Windows updates weren't the cause behind startup failures, so that's some kind of power user, can still do so by manually downloading them from the Windows Update catalog, or in the case of device drivers, using the system's device manager to go get them. So, yes, this feels like a useful and practical and unfortunately necessary CYA move for helping to deal with this past run of troubles Windows 10 has been experiencing after, updates messed up the systems. And of course, it's why I have to have my updates held off for a month, because on this Windows 10 system I'm talking to you over, Leo, I don't want it to collapse on me on a podcast day. So anyway, there's that. We finally have really good information about the Marriott Hotel's Starwood breach. The CEO, in some testimony in front of the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, Arne Sorensen, who's the CEO, apologized in his official statement and testimony to the company's customers, but also shot down some rumors apparently were circulating that China was behind the attack. So in his prepared statement, Sorensen said that Marriott learned something might be wrong for the first time on September 8th of 2018. So that was late summer, early fall of last year, when they were contacted. They first learned when they were contacted by Accenture the IT company who's responsible for managing the Starwood guest reservation database. And of course, as we know and we talked about at the time, Marriott had acquired the Starwood Hotel's properties 2 years previously in September of 2016. Work was underway to migrate Starwood's customers over to Marriott's own guest reservation system, but at the time, the Starwood system was still separate from the rest of the Marriott network. So on that September 8th, Accenture told Marriott's IT staff that a database monitoring system known as IBM Guardian had detected an anomaly on the Starwood guest reservation database the day before, on September 7th. Sorensen said that, quote, I guess it's Guardium. I have it twice here, so that must be correct. Guardium alert was triggered, and I really was impressed by this, by a query from an administrator's account to return the count of rows from a table in the database. It's like, wow, that's very cool that it thought that was suspicious. Such queries, he said in his testimony, are considered dangerous because the software that runs on top of a database doesn't usually need to make such a query. Again, I'm impressed. This meant that a human operator was making this type of very specific query by hand. Sorensen continued, quote, as part of our investigation into the alert, we learned that the individual whose credentials were used had not made the query. At that point, the Marriott staff realized they were dealing with a probable breach.
This is good. This is what's supposed to happen.
Exactly. Although they didn't know if it was something big or just the beginning of a hack that could be very easily contained before the attackers accessed any user data. So it brought in a third-party forensic investigator or third-party forensic investigators on September 10th, so pretty much quickly, to help its IT staff look into a possible breach. Within a week, the forensic firm's investigation uncovered malware on the Starwood IT systems. Sorensen testified that, quote, the investigators uncovered a remote access Trojan, a rat. He writes in his testimony, a form of malware that allows an attacker to covertly access, surveil, and even gain control over a computer. He says, I was notified of the ongoing investigation that day, and our board was notified the following day. Significant forensic work was required to reveal the full scope of the attack, and despite the rat's presence on the Starwood IT system, at that point, there was still no evidence that unauthorized parties had actually accessed customer data from Starwood's guest reservation database. But the investigation continued. 1 month later, in October, the forensic firm discovered Mimikatz, a well-known penetration testing tool which searches a device's memory for usernames and passwords in RAM.
Wow.
The tool was most likely used to help attackers acquire passwords for other Starwood systems to help them move laterally to other parts of the IT network. Still, however, attackers found no direct evidence that attackers had accessed customer data. They knew they'd had a bad infiltration, but they didn't have actual proof. A month after that, the hack turned from probably bad to definitely bad when, in November, investigators discovered that the hackers had been active on Starwood's IT network since July of 2014. This meant that a long-term persistent attack had been underway for more than 2 years without ever being detected. And this meant that the forensics firm had to dig through years of logs. Still, there was no actual evidence of attackers accessing customer data. In mid-November, that evidence was finally found. Sorensen's statement reads, on November 13th, our investigators discovered evidence that 2 compressed encrypted files had been deleted from a device that they were examining. The files were encrypted and the actual content was unknown. There was also evidence to suggest that those 2 files had potentially been removed from the Starwood network. 6 days later, on November 19th, 2018, investigators were able to decrypt the files and found that one contained an export of a table from the Starwood guest reservation database containing guest data, while the other contained an export of a table holding passport information. The hotel chain then notified authorities and went public with its data breach disclosure on November 30th, revealing a breach that impacted around 500 million customers. According to Sorensen's testimony and an update on the Starwood breach notification website, the latest stats surrounding the Marriott breach, which have been updated several times as more was learned, are 383 million guest records were involved, 18.5 million encrypted passport numbers, 5.25 million encrypted passport numbers, 663,000 from the U.S., 9.1 million encrypted payment card numbers, 385,000 card numbers that were still valid at the time of the breach. Sorensen stated that investigative efforts have yet to uncover evidence to suggest that attackers gained access to the encryption key used to encrypt the 9.1 million payment card numbers, but that also presumes that they were probably able to get the keys required to decrypt the other content. So it's likely that some Starwood employee somewhere fell victim to a phishing attack, which allowed someone or something malicious to get into, well, someone at something and someone malicious to get into their machine. That might have been a remote access Trojan that phoned home to report its success and then gave some remote attacker visibility into that machine. From there, the attacker likely perused the connected network and may have moved laterally to other machines. By downloading and installing and running Mimikatz in various machines, vestigial credentials could then have been recovered from RAM and used to further penetrate the organization's network servers and services. So now we know basically the full forensics breakdown of what happened with the Starwood properties.
It's actually fascinating. You realize how hard it is to catch this stuff.
Yes.
Because and now we're pretty sure, at least the intelligence community seems to be pretty sure, that these were Chinese state hackers on the Marriott one, that they were trying to kind of follow spies and Chinese nationals overseas in their reservations and so forth, because it never went in the dark web and all of that.
Right.
Right. So these were, one presumes, very, very skilled hackers.
Well, and delighted to, yes. And so the property was probably, it was a targeted attack, probably phishing email, which could have easily been designed to seem very authentic. Right. That all it takes is one employee somewhere to let it in. And then it sets up it gets a foothold, and then begins then looks at the things that user's machine's connected to, moves itself over into that machine, brings Mimikatz down to scan RAM, finds the login credentials of people who have previously logged into that machine. That allows the bad guys then to log into that machine, and as they say, that's all she wrote.
Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, really, really cool to have a forensics readout of this. And notice that, we wouldn't have this if it weren't for Congress saying
Tell us.
Getting a public account from a CEO. How did this happen? Because no one wants to talk about this in this kind of detail.
No. And yet, and I understand why. I mean, obscurity, security, and all that.
Yeah, it's not in their PR interest.
Hackers know what they're doing. And I'm
That's
sure they only left
saying.
Mimikatz behind because I don't know why did they.
It didn't matter.
It didn't matter
at that point. They got what they needed.
Mm-hmm.
And they were still there, Leo. They were there when this was discovered. So remember that it was somebody.
Well, they're going to stay there till they get kicked out, right?
Yeah. So there was somebody who in real time asked for how many rows in a table that tripped the IBM monitoring software that said, "Whoa, wait a minute!
Yeah.
People don't ask for that." Automated software doesn't ask for that. Who wants to know? And that's what started this. That tripped the alarm that told them that somebody was there.
Fascinating? Yeah.
So they were active at the time.
That's good security software, I think.
I'm impressed by that. Yes.
Yeah.
That's impressive. And I just got a kick out of this, so I wanted to add this to the show. Elaine sent back in our communication that we have every week. According to Merriam-Webster.
Oh boy.
Wow.
I don't like it when emails start like that.
Thank you, Elaine. While it's often maintained that the word doozy derives from the Duesenberg in the name of the famed Duesenberg Motor Company, this is impossible on chronological grounds. Doozy was first recorded in the form DOZY in eastern Ohio in 1916, 4 years before the Duesenberg Motor Company began to manufacture passenger cars. The related adjective doozy, D-O-O-Z-Y, meaning stylish or splendid, is attested considerably earlier in 1903. So where did doozy come from? Etymologists believe that it's an altered form of the word daisy, which was used especially in the late 1800s as a slang term for someone or something considered the best. Oh, he's a daisy. It's a daisy.
It's a daisy.
So it turned into it's a doozy. Indeed. Okay. I got a note from Jamie in Sydney, Australia, who said, spin writing my iPod. He said, working on one spot for hours and hours and hours. He said, Steve, a bit of a story. There is a question in there somewhere, I promise. He says, I've had a copy of SpinWrite for ages. I purchased it many years ago, soon after having discovered the Security Now podcast. He says, at the time, I went back and started from number 1, so I've heard them all. He wrote, I've used SpinWrite quite a few times around the house. I've even had to re-download it once or twice over the years, as it is a very small exe that is very easy to lose. So yes, you can misplace your SpinWrite, and our system allows people who retain their purchase information to update their copy, to re-download it anytime they want. So anyway, he said, recently I inherited an iPod. He says, that's me justifying a short iPod Classic phase I went through where I picked up a few on eBay. He says, I didn't realize at the time, but the hard drive had an issue. I mean, how are you to know, really? Oh, well, I figured I'd fix it with SpinWrite. Didn't seem too much of an issue. Then he has a link to an article running SpinWrite 6 on Mac OS. He said, following this guide, I managed to get SpinWrite running in VirtualBox, connecting to the iPod in disk mode. Very cool that we can do that at all. He said, I kicked off a level 2 scan. As it progressed, it came up with an estimate of 33 minutes to complete. Things were chugging along, so I left it running and went on with some other stuff and sort of forgot about it. A couple hours later, it's still running. SpinRite is fine, and I can navigate around the different UI screens, so the VM is still going, but we're still sitting on 14%. The time estimate has not moved, and he says, if I listen, and here it is, to the iPod, I can hear the drive in what seems like a loop. It's doing the same thing over and over again. Chunk, 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 squiggle, burp, squeak. Over and over and over and over. Wow. I guess this is the drive trying and trying to read one troublesome spot. And so on to the question. When connecting to an iPod like this, or any USB drive, do all the special data recovery techniques you've mentioned over the years, coming at the spot from all angles, etc., still work? On the website, you say it contains and deploys an extensive arsenal of data recovery techniques and technologies designed to pull a drive's data back from oblivion. Do you still have the same low-level control of the drive as you would with a direct IDE connection? Are you able to do everything to a drive connected in this way as you can do to something directly connected to a physical PC via IDE/SATA? By the time you get this, and if it were to air on Security Now, it is, I may well have an answer of my own. I plan to just leave it running, at least overnight, maybe the weekend. Thanks for any answer via Security Now or not. Happy to share on Security Now if you're running low on SpinRite stories. Long-time listener and enjoying every episode. Thanks, Jamie. P.S. Could we bring back a few of the deep dive style episodes where you go deep and tell us all about something? So anyway, to answer your question, Jamie, it is still possible to get better recovery if we have a direct connection. But many people, in fact, many iPods have been recovered by SpinRite, and we've talked about that in the past. So anything is better than nothing, and you've got nothing. What you've got is clearly a drive that is very troubled. And I remind people, and this is something of a value judgment. You know, some people, when SpinRite brings a drive back from the dead, they're like, oh, everything's great again. And it's like, yeah, good. But, you had a problem. And so you may have a problem again in the future. So, it's not, it's great that you were able to get everything back. In some cases, it makes sense to keep using the drive. But what I have long said is, in a competition between SpinRite and the drive, where SpinRite wants it to stay alive and the drive is trying to die, ultimately the drive will win that competition. So
you can't save a drive from itself. Everybody knows that. If
it is absolutely determined to stop being a drive and start being a doorstop, it will become a doorstop. So yes, SpinRite can help. It has helped lots of iPods in the past. Doing what you did, Jamie, is better than nothing. On my list, on my development plan, I'm first going to do the Direct Connect BIOS bypatch AHCI connection for direct attachment of all of our IDE, AHCI, and SATA drives to motherboards. But then my plan is, and I'm going to get that out immediately, and my plan is probably with definitely with 0.1, probably do native Mac at the time, because that would help a lot of people too who have drives in Macs. But then I absolutely want to do the serial interface, and so I plan to then do the same direct to the controller connection for probably, I'll call it SpinRite 6.2, and release that again. Do a series of consecutive releases. That's the plan. So that's where we stand. But yes, definitely. Oh, and as for the deep dive, I don't know how we were ever able to afford those, Leo, in terms of the podcast.
You can only do it when there's no news.
Yeah. And that's just, give us a break, would you, world? And then, I'd be happy to do a deep dive about something. But boy, Just no time. Okay, so finally, we're going to get to the topic of the show here at 2 hours in. It's called spoiler. They have it in all caps, and it stands, well, I want to say it stands for, but it really doesn't, because it's speculative load hazards, boost, row hammer, and cache attacks. So spoiler it's not an abbreviation or an acronym or something, and I read somewhere that they didn't bother trying. So the story is researchers from Worcester Polytechnic Institute in
Worcester.
Worcester?
Yeah, well, Worcester. But they call it Worcester. Worcester Polytechnic, yeah.
Worcester, in Massachusetts.
It's like Worcestershire, it's Worcester.
Okay, Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Worcester, Massachusetts.
That's it. Now you got it. That's the right. He'll tell you.
And the University of Lübeck in Lübeck, Germany, named their work Spoiler. And I saw a comment somewhere that they were too tired afterward to even bother trying to reverse engineer that in order to make it into some clever abbreviation. So spoiler is speculative load hazards, boost, row hammer, and cache attacks. And so it's got buzzwords in it, but it's like doesn't stand for anything. Okay, now their abstract, the abstract of their paper, is going to make everyone's eyes cross. I guarantee it. And it's going to stop the propellers of anyone whose propeller is spinning on their beanies. But that's also kind of the point I want to make with this. I want us to show how the subtly and nuanced attacks such as row hammer and speculative execution evolve over time, and how far out into the weeds the academic security research community can and does go. So for the simplified version, the abstract of their paper says, modern microarchitectures incorporate, and I'm going to stop a few times to clarify, but modern microarchitectures incorporate optimization techniques such as speculative loads and store forwarding to improve the memory bottleneck. Okay, in other words, speculative loads means they're like reading ahead. They're like, as we know, fetching from DRAM, which is slow, in order to try to get content from memory that they believe they may be needing, and then so that's speculative. The processor executes the load speculatively before the stores and forwards the data of a preceding store to the load if there is a potential dependency. Okay, now that means if they've gone ahead and fetched something, but ahead of the logic storing something back into memory. So if where they're storing it back happens to be what they prefetched, then it's whoops, that would have changed the contents that they fetched if they had been waiting to fetch it. So that's a dependency. So that's known as store forwarding. They said this enhances performance since the load does not have to wait for preceding stores to complete. However, the dependency prediction relies on partial address information, which may lead to false dependencies and stall hazards. They said, in this work, we are the first, meaning, the first researchers to show that the dependency resolution logic we're so far, out in the weeds. The dependency resolution logic that serves the speculative load can be exploited to gain information about the physical page mappings. Okay, now that's, of course, the logical to physical mapping. And that bears relevance because row hammer needs to know that the software is able to it's trying to pound on physical memory, yet it's got to work through the page mappings, which has always been a problem for row hammer. microarchitectural side channel attacks such as row hammer and cache attacks rely on the reverse engineering of the virtual to physical address mapping. We propose the spoiler attack, which exploits this leakage to speed up this reverse engineering by a factor of 256. Then we show how this can improve one of the particular row hammer attacks known as prime plus probe attack by a factor of 4,096, which is really dramatic. I mean, it's not like it doubles it. It's 4,000 times faster. Speed up of the eviction set search, even from sandbox environments like JavaScript. Finally, we improve the row hammer attack by showing how spoiler helps to conduct DRAM row conflicts deterministically with up to 100% chance, and by demonstrating a double-sided row hammer attack. Remember, that's where you hammer on both sides of your target, both rows on either side of your target row. They said with normal users privilege. The latter is due to the possibility of detecting contiguous memory pages using spoiler leakage. Whew. Now, I actually had more here in the show notes, but I'm not going to dig into it because, I mean, we're all exhausted at this point. Basically, what has happened is this is yet another very clever attack on a different aspect of the Intel architecture speculation. We've talked about endlessly through 2018 about branch prediction speculation and jump prediction speculation, where there is explicit hardware present to prefetch and go down both paths of a branch, and how it's possible to train the Intel speculation to expect to go down one path and then leak information when you do a context switch, because you're using the same hardware as you were using as another process or VM, for example, was using. Well, it turns out these guys recognized there was something else Intel had done to improve performance, and that's it's in this prefetching system, where it turns out that Intel has a system which is responsible for this fetch ahead, which is different than any of the speculation we've been talking about, and it turns out it can be tricked in a way which is new and unique. None of the existing speculation changes that we've made to microcode have any effect. They state that they don't expect to see for at least 5 years any change, because it appeared in the very first core, the Intel Core, the first generation Intel Core microarchitecture. It is fundamental to a much greater degree than these other speculative tweaks that Intel has made. It is like really deep in. Microcode tweaks won't fix it. The only thing they could do would be to turn it off completely, and it would just crash performance if they did that. And what they did was they found this other aspect of crucial performance speculation, which has been present in every core microarchitecture, and they figured out how to leverage it to create a far more potent row hammer attack by a factor of 4,000 than we've ever seen before. It is potent enough to work in browsers through JavaScript, which is a concern for even the row hammer mitigations where timers have been deliberately made fuzzy in order to thwart the attack. That fuzziness, the level of fuzziness needed, was a function of how difficult the existing research had shown rowhammer would be to work through an already uncertain environment like JavaScript, or to a lesser degree WebAssembly. These guys have got it working in JavaScript and in WebAssembly in a web browser, and so we are once again in trouble. So and rowhammer, remember, is not something we ever really mitigated against. Well, there was mitigation in the browsers. There was talk about increasing the refresh speed so that the cells were less, that would tend less to be flipped by noise created by adjacent hammering on the rows. And then the possibility of next generation DRAM being smarter about like refreshing areas that were under read preferentially, so that this kind of problem, so essentially make hammering attacks obsolete in the hardware. But that, it takes years for that kind of mitigation to get into the channel and then into systems. And many systems are still using, old school inexpensive RAM that is very prone to rowhammer style bit flipping. And now every version of Intel Core architecture from Core 1 is subject to this kind of attack. So again, the famous words of Bruce Schneier echo: attacks never get worse, they only ever get better. And here's another example of that. They did disclose their findings to the Intel Product Security Incident Response Team back at the beginning of December 2018, and probably ruin their holiday, because there's just nothing they can do about this. This is really wow. Oh, but no impact on ARM and AMD. This is explicitly an Intel memory system. It's called the memory order buffer is what they are exploiting. And so neither ARM nor AMD employ this particular form of speculation. But, there are an awful lot of Intel Core processors out there, and these guys don't expect them to be fixable.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, fortunately, again, no
spoiler indeed
in the wild, but
no.
Yeah, good work by the researchers once again.
Yeah, I would argue, it's speculation we have never seen exploited. Right. But we have seen rowhammer exploited. Right. Rowhammer works. Right. And so what this does is this leverages speculation to dramatically improve the efficiency and performance of rowhammer. So this is it's like
they're inching closer,
where we combine problems and end up with something much worse than either one alone. Yeah.
Very interesting. As always, the show is fascinating, and it's every week, and we got, what is that, about 294 episodes left, so make sure you tell your friends. Security Now, you can find a copy of it at Steve's website, grc.com. He's also got transcripts from the dictionary-loving Elaine Ferris, and you can get those at grc.com. While you're there, you can also pick up a copy of SpinRite, the world's best hard drive maintenance and recovery utility. What else can you do there? Oh, my gosh, there's a limitless amount of fun. Just explore around. Everything else is freely available, including Squirrel and more. If you want video, we've got it along with audio at our website, twit.tv/SN. And if you want to watch us live, we do it 1:30 Pacific, 4:30 Eastern. That is now 20:30 UTC because we sprang forward. 20:30 UTC at twit.tv/live. Audio and video is there. Join us in the chat room if you do that, because they're watching live too, irc.twit.tv. And on-demand audio and video from twit.tv/SN. Or best thing to do, subscribe in your favorite podcast application. That way you'll get it automatically. Complete the set. Get all 999. Steve, have a great night, and I'll see you next week on Security Now.
I did want to mention we got a very nice response to my call for Android UX experts.
good.
Like 7 or 8 people have
Squirrel.
responded and said,
Fantastic.
"Hey, I can." I said Spinner. I meant Squirrel UX experts. So thank you very much, everybody. And they are online and they're taking a look to see about enhancing the Android Squirrel app. And I'm continuing to work on that, getting it ready for the world.
The world needs it.
Okay, my friend.
Have a great night.
Bye.
Security Now.